And so I just opted not to go, because you've got to, as a person with disability, allocate your resources where they're most needed.
Yeah. There are the roadblocks and restrictions to be able to do different jobs or different tasks. How limiting is that for the person? Like, does it cap them at a certain level where they're not allowed to go any further?
I have issues around being invisible or being put into a box that I don't belong into. You know what I mean? So when I'm with other people with disabilities, or when I'm with other queer people, that's when I feel seen and heard and safe.
I sometimes need to have a seat that's actually more accessible, you know, and give myself permission to request that. Whereas even 5 years ago, I'm thinking about what you were saying, mate. I was, oh no, I'm fine. But one day I may be fine, you know, like someone said, like even now, you know, someone said, do they want to fill my cup? You say, oh no, that's fine, I can do it.
Thank you for being here today. Welcome to our discussion for International Day of People with Disability. I'm so excited to be here with you, with some new faces and also some people that I've met and worked with before. My name's Emily. I'm the facilitator of this discussion. And before we start, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're on, which is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and that this was, and always will be Aboriginal land. I guess I just wanted to start and let's all get to know each other and how we came to be here today. So I am a writer, actor, producer across film and television, and I'm also a bit of a disability advocate, so that's what I'm here for. Anyone else want to introduce themselves?
I will start, if that's okay. I'm Dan Graham. I'm a theatre director, arts access coordinator at Sydney Arts Venue Brand X, and like you, sometimes call myself a bit of a disability advocate as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. I could say the same. I'm a bit of a disability advocate, performer and public speaker. My name's Danny. I live with a disability and I also identify as trans non-binary.
Thanks, Danny.
I'm Garth. Became an amputee in 2018. I've previously worked a lot across digital. Currently a stay-at-home dad. Got 3 beautiful children at home, and yeah, hopefully can be a disability advocate as well. So
cool.
Thanks, you. I'm gonna start with a bit of a cute question. What do you think makes you all happiest? When are you happiest? So I'm happiest when I'm listening to Taylor Swift or hanging out with my beautiful niece. But what about you guys?
I'm happiest when I'm alone and no one knows where I am. And when I'm able to focus and be mindful of my movement and the ways that I use my body to be in the world and be visible. But I prefer being invisible and alone.
Fair enough.
So
That's
I'm
totally valid. What does anyone else think?
I would have to say, Emily, when basically, as you know, I've just come off a development with Bill Shakespeare where I was the director and creator, and that combined my 2 loves and places I'm most happy, that of being in the world of theatre, as well as doing work in terms of our accessibility space, and specifically for those who are neurodiverse, like myself. So I try to always say I can't divorce them, they all go together. So it's probably the most happy that you literally, as I said on that particular production, you know, I was more nervous trying to represent as best as I could the neurodiverse community. Hopefully I did somewhat, you know, because obviously everyone's unique. But it was just literally, I think, creating, you know, when I'm in my creative zone, and I classify this as a creative zone, so yeah.
That's like, yeah, I understand that's like when you lose time doing something, and I feel the same way
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that pressure to represent community as well, I think is something that we all
Absolutely.
come at and experience differently in different ways. But I think that pressure is really present for us all as well.
Because I think it's back to what I just said, and you're saying, Em, that basically you have, if I can say this, two people here with a lived experience of disability, a part of the LGBTQI community. We are two different people.
Yeah.
You know, so
When you know one person, you know one person.
totally,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, no, I think for me, I can definitely relate to what Danny was saying with some alone time, you know, your own peace and quiet, particularly with kids, but also for me, like spending time with the children, just simple things like, you know, being at the beach or even just going to live sports events or music concerts. I think that's when I'm truly happy because you have that freedom and the ability to be able to do that, even with lived disability. I think's such an important thing, and it's important for being inclusive in just the community, isn't it? Being able to access and
Definitely.
just be part of different communities as we all are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that idea of, you know, being out in the world and being visible is really important, because I don't know what you guys think, but one of the biggest sort of attitudinal barriers that I find comes from people who have never had much quote unquote exposure to people with disability. So I think it's really important for people to get out and about and be visible in the community doing the things that they sort of love doing. But obviously there's challenges that people face with getting out and about. Do you guys find it sort of easy or challenging to get around in terms of travel and, yeah, just being visible?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, well, for me personally, I know over the last 5 years, it's been something I progressively got better at with managing prosthetics and being out in the community. But I was joking with the guys before, saying it's kind of like the Terminator, where you're scanning all the terrain
Constantly.
and the, you know, steps and uneven surfaces and trying to
Yeah.
navigate your way through that, and then looking at different seating arrangements or positions that you can be where you can be safe, whether you're going to the movie theatres or a music concert or a sporting event, just so you can actually be there and be a part of it. So, and I have caught trains and light rail and buses, but generally in the early days I was in catching a taxi, just because that was easier in terms of getting from point A to point B. But there definitely are those barriers within normal city life where you have to be aware of dangers that could be present for people with different disabilities. So I think so, and you know, we'll have the right to these different events or be included in community and recreation, and so I think that's really relevant point for us. Like,
I would say personally, Emily, I'm fortunate most of the time, and I stress most of the time, I'm able to use public transport and quite independent in that, in all senses, but we're talking about transport in this sense. But at the same time, I do know, as you know, I've just come back from a Churchill Fellowship where I spent 5 weeks by myself overseas, and I actually had to give myself, and this is something I'm learning over time, for someone who's of lived experience with disability, of self-care. You know, like if I need time to actually take a break, you know, and literally when you live in a city as I was of New York, which I jokingly say Sydney's a country town in comparison, you know, literally I made sure after each interview I got myself a couple hours between each one so I could actually just, I don't want to say get myself together, that sounds a bit dramatic. Hello, anyone watching will say, Dan, dramatic? Never. No. Emily knows. You know, but it was literally, you know, that, you know, I gave myself, you know, that time, go to what you were saying, a quiet space, that it was just me, my coffee.
Yeah.
What have I just done?
Yeah.
You know, I have to get to 42 to 97 oh gosh, I don't know the subway, you know, but
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And self-care is so important for everyone, really, particularly as, you know, disability advocates, because we're so often, you know, in conversations like this, sharing our experiences. And yeah, so I guess I just wanted to ask, how important do you guys think self-care is in terms of that?
Self-care is absolutely critical, and even in line with what you were saying, I was resonating with that, like trying to predict what kind of issues might come up insofar as the architecture of a building, for example, is really important. But insofar as travel, I do better with a Malak key. I've got my Malak key now, so that's really helpful for me. And I'm always trying to predict, like, where is it, like, how am I going to get there? How am I going to care for myself as I'm getting there? And then, like you say, you know, like you might want to step out. For me, I don't step out. See, so for me, I'm kind of similar. I have to block my day and my schedule around checking in with myself and doing that self-care, and almost kind of steeling myself or getting my emotional reserves together enough to address where I'm going in a way that's going to make it accessible.
But I think it's the point about allowing yourself to. Yeah. Because when I say what I'm doing, this is literally the last year or two, and maybe COVID, I don't know if you're going to get to that, but it's been COVID that self-imposed, you know.
Yeah.
Limitations, what do you want to call it, you know, that people always say to me, you always could talk about other people's own excess, but your own, I'm the worst.
Yeah.
And literally it was just to be okay, or
but just to get through. Function.
Exactly, and function,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I think that as people with disabilities, it takes so much time and energy and resources just to exist in a world that's not built for us.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think self-care comes into play, because you have to fill your own cup. And you're right, Dan, like COVID's interesting because it obviously put up a lot of barriers and put a lot of pressures on people for a lot of different reasons. But I also find that sort of overnight, everybody had access needs. And obviously everybody dropped everything to cater for that. And it just made me realize, like, people have been advocating for their access needs to be catered to, you know, since the beginning of time. Suddenly COVID comes and it becomes possible.
Yeah, for everybody.
For everybody.
Yeah.
And so it just goes to show how, you know, if you make things accessible, then they can be accessible for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not just people with disability. And that sort of breaks down that barrier of being othered as well. But yeah, but it is, you know, you were talking, Dan, about, you know, being able to advocate for other people more than yourself. And I think we all have to contend with internalized ableism to a degree, because the world's not built for us.
No, and I think, Emily, that's why it's so important, the self-care, and just whether it is time out by yourself, just to, whether it is, you know, some form of meditation or even just quiet time just to listen to music or read. But again, because you do, in some ways, you do feel like the world's against you, and you need to just reflect and take time on for yourself. And that self-care element's so important just for your mental health, to be able to kind of reset and just get ready to kind of go again and get back out there.
Yeah.
Back on the saddle, as they say.
Yeah, and that's even after you've kind of negotiated, is it worth it as well? You know what I mean? Like sometimes it might be, well, I want to do ABC, but unfortunately, either I can't, or I don't have the emotional reserves to actually to approach these people and ask these questions to see if it is accessible or safe for me as well. So that, you know, sometimes there comes a point where Some things have to be let go. And part of self-care, I feel, is letting go as well sometimes of those things. Like it's oftentimes contextual, the situation or the system. It's not us. It's not us.
Yeah.
It's the system essentially. And so there are times when, for me, that it gets too much and I literally cannot access a place.
But I think that's okay too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can step away and just go, because I know that's happened to me as well, and I just know that's just pushing it too much, and then you're like, can't really be bothered. I don't know if it's just because I've got older as well. And then you just
Old and
It's
wise.
okay to say this is all I have and this is all I can do today.
Today,
Like
yeah.
having to learn to be gentle with ourselves and accept that is part of the process for me, and also prioritizing what is more important, you know, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that's you fit the nail on the head. I think that's the key, really, just being able to let go and go, well, that's okay.
Yeah,
Just-
without the FOMO.
Yeah, well, that's right. You've got to, and again, I don't know, for me personally, if it was just because you get older and a bit more mature and you don't care as much, but yeah, just that fear of missing out on things, and you just can, you can just let it go. And if you know it's just going to be such a mission, getting there, getting back, dealing with the environment and access requirements, sometimes you just have to, let it go.
I think, sorry.
No, you got it.
No, I was just going to say back to what you're saying, mate, because we're close in age. I think it is that old adage of, you know, choosing your battles, you know.
Exactly.
You know.
Is this an education opportunity? Is this an
Exactly.
opportunity for learning? Is this
Emily
person
wants
open
me to do this
listening?
video. I like Emily. Yes, I know Emily. Tick. Get 2 ticks.
I think we're all about the same age, actually.
Yeah, I was thinking about
A
that.
bit older.
You know, it's so true, because even last night I was supposed to go to an event and I was excited about it, but then I started thinking about, I have to get out there, it's at home push, I have to get out there, get back, I have to be here early, ready on set to film this video. How meta of me that is. And so I just opted not to go, because you've got to, as a person with disability, allocate your resources where they're most needed.
Yep.
And I guess I know that we've talked, Garth, about, because you have an acquired disability,
Yeah.
it's been sort of an adjustment for you in terms of adjusting to being disabled.
And yeah, it's because I got sick when I was 35, so I'd sort of had all this experience being fully abled and active and doing different sports, and, you know, had a family and lived overseas and travelled the world and just done all these things. So on one hand, that was mentally easier for me to accept, where things were taken away at that time. I've since, you know, learned to manage with prosthetics and be more independent, like back driving the last 2 years, and just do normal things like go grocery shopping, drop the kids to school, pick them up, just
Simple things.
go to a sports event, or go out and see a band, or just go out with your friends for drinks and have a big night. Just things that you know, that normal people would do, right? I know we're all normal people here,
but I know.
Oh, speak for yourself.
but you know, fully abled with no
Yeah.
limitations.
Yeah.
And then happening at that age, just before I turned 36, and then that all being taken away, and then I couldn't even like hold a fork or put a shirt on or move different parts of my body, and then gradually every week I've just got a bit stronger or retrained my brain to be able to do things. So yeah, I get back to your point, Emily, like it's been real learning, life-changing experience for me, because everything kind of got flipped on its head and had to, like, I think we were talking before, I had to kind of reset and start again. And it's just been this thing over 5 years where I've just learned how to do everything again, retrained myself. And yeah, it's just, you just take it day by day, and I think you just be positive and like, I think we just accept, whether it's because we've got older and wiser, but we just accept there's things that, yeah, you can do it, but is it just silly to push yourself that far, that you put yourself at risk of serious injury or you know, some other problem might occur. So sometimes you have to know when to kind of pull the reins back and just go, yeah, I think that's pushing the boundaries a little bit at this point in time.
Yep.
But, and you've got to be content with that. I think, you know, I think it's important mentally that you can accept certain barriers to your life, which is fine. And with accessibility and assistive technology and support workers, they still do open up doors to be able to access community events or get out in the community or get from A to B. So, there doesn't have to be a limit on anything that we do, but just knowing that we can pick and choose to what suits our sort of emotional state or our mental health, you know, where we're at with our life.
Exactly.
1 month you may feel like you can do something, other month you're like, I can't be bothered.
Exactly.
So it's I think it's just being able to say, no, it's okay. Like as a teenager or someone in my 20s, I may not have been able to do that, but as you get older, you can just like, it's all right. I'll let that one go.
It always boggles my mind how unaware some people are about access needs, partly because disability is one of the only minorities that anyone can join at any time. Like, it doesn't discriminate. Anyone can become disabled overnight. And but I think maybe that's part of the reason like people are scared of that. So they don't want to acknowledge us.
Yeah, people maybe they don't want to be reminded of their own what
Mortality.
they see as a vulnerability or a weakness, which it's not. It's absolutely not. It's a benefit. And it's interesting, like just even listening to you talking about having an acquired injury. It was so dramatic. Whereas for me, my disability has been like an ongoing adult lifelong thing, and I've just slowly adjusted around it. But like yourself, I also have to prioritize what's important and what do I need to do, like we'll talk about traveling, before I get there, so that when I get there I can be mindful and present and effective and helpful for other people, you know. And if I will do everything I can to make sure I can do that in a safe place, you know, whenever I am presenting or being in the world, you know.
But it is funny, what you were just back to what you were saying, Emily, that whole idea about having a disability either from birth, late in life, etc. Anyone can get it, and I think I try to, in my own advocacy space, you know, try to point out that exact point, because it is interesting. Like I've said, I was just saying to you that someone very close to me has got acquired disability, and for someone who does all the work that I'm doing, I only recently said to him, "Oh, I understand where you're coming from." Actually, Dan, you don't. And I had to understand my own internal ableism, you know, which is, you know, and realise that basically, you know, this person's disability has come later in life. And it's basically like, if we look at a social model of disability, the whole idea is it's actually society around us that is disabling us, not us being a disabled people. So I think that's something that, again, over time, you realise, like, as you said, like, I sometimes, being in theatre, need to have a seat that's actually more accessible, you know, and give myself permission to request that. Whereas even 5 years ago, I'm thinking about what you were saying, mate. I was, no, I'm fine, but one day I may be fine, you know, like someone said, like even now, you know, someone said, do they want to fill my cup? You say, no, that's fine, I can do it. Give yourself permission, I think. And that doesn't make you, again, it doesn't make you, this is just my personal attitude, disabled. It's basically, you know, those barriers that you put in place that sometimes we want to tackle them. Like sometimes I can be like dog with the bone, you know, won't let go. But sometimes I throw the bone to someone else. Meat and all.
But again, it's like you say, choose your battles, you know, absolutely.
Because I think, you know, coming up against those, whatever your barriers are every day, can be exhausting. And so we talk so much about choice and control and having control of our lives. But for some people, Like, they've never had the opportunity to do that, and they don't know where to start. And they don't, that requires a lot of energy to take accountability and responsibility in your life like that, when you might have spent a lifetime not having those choices.
But back, Emily, I think it goes back to left of society. Like, I'm being blunt on camera when I say this, something I've said to you. When you reached out to me, I am, and again, as you get older and more wiser, hopefully, sometimes not, literally, when someone I know of lived experience, who I've known for, as I said, close to 10 years now, I'm far more open to be part of a project like this than someone who literally has that idea of someone close to me knows someone with the experience. And I think, like, I am trying to push, especially because again, we said we're all close to the same age, the next generation, generations after us, literally, hopefully will have their own self-advocacy inbuilt in that they basically, they can speak for themselves. And as I said, like, even with this project I did recently, like, I had to watch myself that there were 6 different people who were neurodiverse. The requirements, like, we had a quiet space actually on set, and if one of my actors, no names, particularly needed that space was available to him. And it wasn't seen as, hey, this is your safe space. It was just already built in to the environment.
Yeah. I think supportive community is something that's really important for people to have. How important is that for each of you?
It's the only community that sees me. The only community that sees me, generally speaking, is people with disabilities and people, if I can use the term Levitica, or as I prefer to say, just queer. That's the only time I feel that either my disability and my subjectivity is visible and relevant. And it's interesting for me because when I'm within a system, I'm often what's recorded on paper is so different than what is being presented face to face. I don't have issues with my stuff around being visible. I have issues around being invisible, or being put into a box that I don't belong into. You know what I mean? So when I'm with other people with disabilities, or when I'm with other queer people, that's when I feel seen and heard and safe. And that's when I feel like I have we were talking about agency and autonomy before. That's when I feel like I can speak my truth, for want of a better word, but tell my actual story, because otherwise, it's kind of like preaching to the choir here, obviously. But for the average, because we've all been socialised in an ableist, heteronormative, cisgendered world, and we're all internalised that to a certain degree. And you were talking before about doing theatre and being out in the world in that way, and it reminds me of this whole, we're moving away from this pathologization of about it's the individual and you have a disability and it's your fault, because you're right, it's actually the rest of the world that doesn't cater to us.
But that's only recent.
It's only recent, but it's happening. It's happening, and I'm so grateful to be here now, because it's happening. This role has been happening for over 20, 30 years. We've been coming this way, so.
Absolutely.
It takes the onus off us.
Garth, how important do you think community is?
Crucial. I think, for me personally, local community, not just like family and friends. I mean, they really helped my wife and I get through a pretty traumatic time. So that support around you, and just helping with my daughters. We hadn't had our son at that stage, but 2 daughters lived with the grandparents for like 8 months while I was in hospital. So just the local community, neighbours, close friends, just chipping in with various things like kids to school, with grocery items, just basic things, for day-to-day living. So that community support there was great. And then once I left hospital, sort of back home, just the help with support workers to just get back out into local communities, whether it's local sporting events. My kids play various sports, so just that local community where people who live nearby, they're also at those events. So I think that support for our family was great. So I think it was crucial for us in terms of managing a difficult period in our life to just get back to a new normal. And yeah, I think having that love and that support from different people in all aspects of our life just was absolutely critical, like to us getting through, like mentally being able to pull through and feeling emotionally supported and just having the strength and the positivity around us. So yeah, I think communities are so important, and just even in your local community, whether it's something simple like going down the street or your cafe, just you know, maybe doing something that just helps people with a disability to access their restaurant or their cafe is just something that builds community trust and just, yeah, I think that sense of community, that localized, can go a long way for that person to make them feel included and make them feel part of it and not a kind of an outcast. Like, I know it still exists now, and particularly for all different cultures and groups, it's still the same, not just people who are disabled, but it seems to be heading in the right direction where things are more open, and I think the key is empowerment. So the more empowered all these different communities have, the more they can have a voice. That just opens so many doors, because then it's not they're not kind of the different person or the outcast or something, you know, whether it's a workplace or a sporting club or you know, the theatre or just whatever aspect of life there is. I think just to feel welcome and included and not kind of segregated and just yeah, I think that's just absolutely critical for people with disability, just to make them feel that they're welcome too. They can take part, they can play their part, and they can be involved. Like there's sort of a role for everyone, and everyone can help out in a different way. And I think that builds a real community where people look out for one another. So we personally got to experience a lot of that, which was great, and it gives you a good kind of sense that, you know, the world's not always all bad. Like it's there's some good people out there, and I think if people all work together, there's no reason why it can't keep getting better.
Without doing your job, Em, can I ask you, mate, have you noticed, because it seems like as much as it can be a good experience, but can you see the before and after? And like, have people seen you, some people treated you differently? I'm trying to be in a politically correct way, and then tell me to shut up.
No, that's a really good question, Dan.
No, it's true. It was funny, earlier on people had come up to me and they kind of, you know, talk to you as though you got them like mental disabilities as well. So they talk slowly.
We can do a whole video,
Em. No, mate, I can talk.
You're just fine. You know,
still talk. Like, but it's funny, some people just see you and then they just put it all in together. Yeah. And there's obviously so many different types of disabilities and restrictions on people, and they just see that and just treat it all the same. So it's quite funny. It's like, oh no, I can still talk.
Yes, I
can have a conversation. It's
even with my enablism, I was thinking, do I move this up? Because I know, like, it's so funny, like, even for someone who, inverted commas, appears normal, whatever that means, as we are all saying, you know, like I even have people saying to me in my advocacy work, I've had people say to me, so great you're helping these people with disability, Dad. And I say, oh, you mean me? Yeah.
Yes.
What? Oh, what? Yeah, not disabled, Dad. Yeah. You know.
And I think it's important, you know, I know we all know this, but I think it's important to say that, like, even if someone does have, say, an intellectual disability or a cognitive disability or a communication difference or disability, I think the best way to approach that is as you would anyone else. And then if you have to adjust you do that according to the individual person.
The individual, absolutely. Definitely.
My rule of thumb is to assume ability and then adjust where you need to, which I think is kind of important. I think this conversation leads into a question that I have for you all around how non-disabled people can be really good allies to the disabled community.
I would have to say, from my perspective, and again, I'm only coming from my personal lived experience, it's literally, I find it interesting, the people who you would classify in my world as allies who literally don't want to push themselves into the world, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And literally, like, I have people, like, I've got someone who does work in a disability space but doesn't have a disability, and they said to me, I can't have the lived experience, Dan. I want to know or listen. And if I ever hear someone, wherever it is, and we're talking disability here, I understand, my blinkers straight away go down. Because I, myself, we've got 4 people here, as I said, 4 different lived experiences, you know. And I think it's you have to be very mindful as a person with a disability and careful about those people that you allow in that space, you know, like, I, as people can tell, can speak for myself, but there are times like, it's especially inverted commas, don't look like I have a disability, inverted commas, you know, that they are like, I'm going into hospital to have an operation, as you know, later on this week. I had to explain to the hospital, I need someone to help me physically wipe the form.
Yeah.
And for me to actually give myself permission to actually say that,
Yeah.
know, there's often a pause, like, it's only a few questions, or we just need your signature. Yeah, I can do my signature, but if my hands literally will go into spasm and cramp up,
Yes.
you know, and like, but it's, I go back to, I know I'm saying again, but again, like, I am at a stage of my career in advocacy, as I said, you know, like, when you reached out to me, it was an automatic yes, because I know you, and not that you even come from best intentions or lived experience. Let's be honest, I trust you. It's simple. No, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know, whereas there's some people, and it has happened to me, only I was just saying when we were getting ready, I've had people saying to me, will you do this? And when I see what I say is alarm bells, or, you know, that I don't think it's authentically done, that's when I will separate myself from that. And I won't say guide people, I know, because everyone has their own opinions, but guide people to literally what is, I don't want to say best practice, but what actually is what I think will be done in an authentic manner. So, yeah.
So trust and listening to individual people is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think definitely. And then it does come back to the individual, doesn't it? Because everyone's different. And I think if they're genuine about just being your friend or being in your circle, they'll do the right thing in terms of adapting to your needs if you need them. Like, I usually find, like, my friends try and help me, like, if we're out and about, and but a lot of the time I'll just sort of say, you know, I'll let you know if there's something that I need help with. I'll let you know. Otherwise, you know, I personally just try and manage it myself until the point where, like, oh, actually, could you help me with this? Or, can you get me a chair, please? Or just little things like that. So, and I know everyone's different and different levels of needs, but I think just being empowered to make your own decisions and not go, oh, well, you're disabled, you need this and you need all this help, and you know, you can't do anything for yourself. So, for me, that'd be the worst thing. Like, as being a pretty independent person, I would just, I want to call the shots about how I access the world and the things I do.
If I can be blunt, mate, it's your life. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And it should be your own personal choice. Sometimes you might need help, sometimes you don't. And,
exactly.
But I think it comes down to the individual, and as long as people respect that and can adapt, then it'll be fine, because you're all working together and not sort of pigeonholing you. Oh, you're disabled, well, I better do all this for you. And I think that just disempowers you to, which I think then makes you, it takes away that kind of, that leverage and that power that you have to do things yourself. And for me, it's just more, I'll let you know if I need assistance with something. I'll be the one that calls that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what both of you have said, but I would add to that, kindness is really important. I feel kindness, and also maybe being aware that that person, if they do need support or help in something, like if I do, I need to know that I can be vulnerable enough to ask and disclose.
Yes.
So for me, it needs to be a safe place in that way. But there's also this thing about, like you're saying, potentially there's that dismissive, oh, you're disabled business. But for me, it's important that people don't assume anything about me. But because I'm in this intersectionality as a transgender person, I prefer to be asked about some things, but not particularly asked about my disability. So for me, it gets a little bit, it's hard, because sometimes I want to be asked, because then I'm going to give the correct answer because it's me. And everybody is different, but it may not be. It may be framed. The questions may be framed in a way that aren't informed, or that come across as ignorant, or something of the like. And I will tend to withdraw and remove myself completely at that point. And the same also if they're overdoing it, like you're saying, if they're more like, well, you've got a disability, so we're going to check in with you first, or give me some kind of priority over someone else. I could be there with 10 other people with disabilities and not know it, just as much as anyone else. Like, you know what I mean? Just be, So, and the other thing as well is the people helping me might also have a disability. And they might be transgender or identify somewhere on the rainbow spectrum. So I'm also aware of potentially where they're coming from, and that will affect how I interact with them as well, and what I do ask for, and what I disclose.
And that's the thing, it comes back to, like, we are the experts on our own experience. But if I'm working or interacting with someone who has, say, still a disability, but a different disability to me, I'm then on the other side of that. And I think as a person, if you don't know, all you have to do is be upfront with the person and say, I don't know what you want me to do here, but I'm open to supporting you and to learning and making mistakes. And I think on either side of an interaction, it's okay to make, give yourself permission to make mistakes. You don't always get things right. No one gets things right, whether you're disabled or not, all the time. And I think what happens when you give both people within an interaction the freedom to be themselves and to be authentic and make mistakes, within that, you get a closer connection, because you're both learning from each other, right? And you're valued and connected and stuff like that. I
would agree, Em. I would much prefer a person to make a mistake than say we know the answer. And as I said, like often I have people come to me to get the answer, and when I say I don't have the answer, I'm talking from non-disabled people. What do you mean you don't have answer? Guess what? I don't. And be honest, not within just oneself, but actually, I think it's that powerful thing is, especially as we go, and I'm talking performing arts context here, Em, the diversity is the key word at the moment, and disability is slowly getting there as we both become queer, and But it's that funny thing is like I would listen to someone, because now I'm the work that I'm doing as an access coordinator, I'm literally on the other side, and it's really quite funny, like seeing from both sides, and it's so funny that you can see things like what they are, and I think that's something called the Terminator superpower, whatever you want to call it, is I feel I can actually read people's intentions, if that makes sense, and basically what they wish to do. Like, as I said, this production that I just recently did with Bill Shakespeare, it was very important to me that literally, it was so funny, there was only one person in that room who wasn't neurodiverse. And you would have to ask that person how they felt, honestly, you know.
Yeah.
But, I mean, honestly, you know, but it was interesting, like, just what we're doing now. There were times we were saying something and it was just like, da-da-da, nod. But you haven't finished what you were saying. No, everyone's nodding what you, and you're doing to them. You know, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you?
So I was just having a giggle, sorry. That's my own experience. Relating.
I think that's a really good segue actually into my next question.
Amazing.
Because I was going to ask you guys about, you know, I think access to employment and to education is really crucial for people with disability. And I wanted to ask about your experiences or anything you want to share in regard to that.
I found the process of I've been at school since I was 2 years old. Up until about 2 years ago, full-time, several degrees, postgraduate degrees. And I found that generally speaking, the process for getting registered as a student with a disability is worse than sometimes, it wasn't worth the amount of effort I put into going to the appointments, filling out the forms to get, 5 minutes extra at an exam or in a different chair or potentially different lighting or no white noise in a certain room. And it was quite difficult for me. So for me, when I next enroll, I'm going to have an NDIS service provider help me with that. But that was my experience in education as someone with a disability. As someone who's transgender, I found it interesting because unfortunately, the many systems at university would only have an I as a potential gender marker, which could be intersex or intermediate or indeterminate, could mean many things. And unfortunately, because that was on the roll, on the roster, every single time there was a question about disabilities or trans people or gender or queer anything, the teacher would direct it at me, which outed me automatically.
Oh, no.
So I've had some, now that I've had those kinds of experiences, it's like I'm much more aware of how and when I disclose these things. So in some ways I feel like sometimes getting support around my disability, in fact, can harm me, if that makes sense. Like sometimes the actual getting it is not worth the support that I'm getting at times, within the education system anyway. That's been my experience.
But it goes to that self-ableism attitude, like, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back when I say this. As part of this trip recently, I went to Yale University, you know, to investigate the work they were doing. Halfway through, and I sent all my details, you know, who I was, director, access, etc., etc. Halfway through, they stopped me in a conversation and said, Dan, the more we're talking to you, we want to encourage you to apply to do the Masters at Yale, which is great. But my ableism came in and I said to me, but what support would be available? Because back to you were saying, and I looked at me, Dan, we know enough people have checked up on you. We're talking to you as Dan, the director. But, and I had to be reassured, that does sound patronising, but be reassured, it's okay, Dan, go to Yale. You know, no, but it was reassured they actually wanted me as me.
Yeah.
But back to what you were saying, like, I have had numerous times, because both of us, and I will say with you too, man, I have been outed without me wanting to be outed, you know, and I do find it funny, like, in terms of, especially in terms of university settings, like you, postgrad studies, etc., you know, like, I have had issues, like, especially when it's even something recently, not Yale, but something else, I had to apply for something, and it was mentioned disability. I had to explain to them why I needed a support, and it was related to disability. Them themselves said to me, oh, you don't really need that support, Dan. Well, I actually do.
Yeah.
And I think as I get older, and it's what we all were saying early on, not just choose my battles, but realise, you know, where the support will come into place. Like, unfortunately, with me and ideas personally, I am at a stage, and I always say this as a director, I'm never going to be directing full time. That's just a reality, disability or otherwise, just unless you're at a top, you know. But the funny thing is, I'm at the issue of trying to find employment, but unfortunately people don't know, or they want to put me in a certain box. I have had, with my NDIS, etc., people saying to me, you know, like, and this actually said to me, makes me think what you were saying a moment ago, I should dumb down my CV. Why should I dumb down my CV? I have literally probably done more study than I need to, and I'm not talking for you, mate, I'm talking for myself here, because of the very issue of trying to prove myself to other people as well as myself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how do we get to that issue, like, let's say bluntly, you know, I went to Disability Employment Agency before COVID, and the comment to me was, we could get your job working in Bunnings. Minus anything else, yay or nay to Bunnings, and love a good sausage sizzle, what can I say? But, yeah, but I couldn't, with me, stand for 9 hours straight.
Yeah.
To work at
Bunnings.
Yeah.
Whereas instead of saying myself as too good for something, where is the actual space, you know, that the skills that I do have to contribute to society, you know, and I'm in society as a whole, so yeah.
Garth?
Well, in the last 5 years, I haven't really had too much personal experience with education, and I can understand that, where it's just more hassle than it's worth. And will it add value to you? And sometimes you're better off just not ticking that box, because if it's going to be a hassle for you and hard, why would you do that to yourself? And it shouldn't be that way, should it? Like, because I've been in digital for 15, 20 to 20 years, I was lucky in that sense where still got most of my right hand, and so I've done a little bit of, just for free over the past few years, work for help family, friends, e-commerce websites, that type of thing, digital marketing, which has been good just to keep the brain ticking over and practice the computer skills. And at least with technology, with smartphones and computers, a lot of them do have accessibility features now, and voice control, and if I needed that. So for me, yeah, I haven't ventured into that where I, you know, going to recruitment agencies or job interviews now, and whether they limit me or whether they pigeonhole me because of physical disability. Though luckily for me, in terms of my physical disability, that my experience was in digital, so therefore, you know, if I can kind of manage a mouse and a keyboard, I can get by, not as fast as I used to be, but at least I can still make it work to a certain level. But I know for others, like, there are the roadblocks and restrictions to be able to do different jobs or different tasks. And how limiting is that for the person, like, in terms of their chosen professional career path? Does it cap them at a certain level where they're not allowed to go any further? And that's what we have to change, right? We have to advocate, because there's no reason why
we can't participate.
That's right. Got the ability, got the knowledge, and there shouldn't be something that just holds you back, or a power up higher that just sort of, for whatever reason, whether it's a publicity thing or whatever, shouldn't restrict your ability to go as far as you possibly want to go. And it should just, your potential, your choice about what you want to do with your life and your career path, your contribution to society and to yourself, right? So, and that's why I think the advocacy for all of us is so important, because we've got to get that voice and get the word out there. And platforms, especially like social media, can be a very powerful tool for changing people's perceptions, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's affected me to the point you're saying, like, for you, it was a different kind of segue. Like, I have not worked for any organisation other than for people with disabilities or a libidical organisation my entire adult life. I just won't do it. So that. Oh, you okay? So for me, all my skills, all my education, all the energy I put, it only goes back to the community that's not my community, of course, but our community, right? Okay. So for me, it's like, I don't have the capacity to go to certain places and do certain things. It's not within, it's just not possible with my kind of neurodivergent brain to do that.
Yeah.
So I've instead focused it all on staying within this community. And that's how I've managed to find a way of kind of taking ownership of my disability and using that to help other people rather than trying to push against this brick wall, it feels, which is the employment system in general. Because, the disability service providers that do with employability, like Bunnings, for example, I'm sorry, is that in line with your career goals? Is that like the
I told you I like sausage sizzles.
Well, yeah, that's great, but we have so much more to bring. And I think
totally.
if we get to that point, I think for myself anyway, I found that once I started taking ownership of my disability and once I started realising that and internalising kind of making it part of who I was, I realised that's really not the only place I can come from, but that is my strength that I can bring to the table as distinct from, trying to do something that is not necessarily accessible to me, and again, having to choose and prioritise and go, well, actually, I don't want to work in insurance, in health insurance. Yeah. I want to be working in advocacy and for people with disabilities, or I want to be working for queer people, or, in harm minimisation, whatever else that it is. The co-design work and the consultation work that I'm currently doing, that I'm seeing coming up within the community for people with disability, is allowing us to have more of our voices being heard through social media, more of our stories being told, which is probably one of the best things an ally can do, really, is that kindness and that listening. So.
And you're giving back to your communities, and
I'm not
helping
wasting
us
this
all.
on a system that says I don't exist. Why am I
driving profit? So no, that's good. I'm sure for you that's really fulfilling and positive and more whole for you, because you're not kind of like just on the treadmill and just making money, making other people rich.
I can't do it.
Which is great.
I won't do it at the expense of
it's why it's your life. You can, you can do what you like.
Yeah.
So,
but it goes back to that whole thing. If I can just say to just what you say, it's our life. Because I think it's interesting. Like, I don't necessarily, or I don't. Let's be honest. If I can, I can be honest, I don't want to do work where it exclusively deals with disability, because I always say, and this might get a bit controversial here, disability is one part of my identity, as is my queerness, as is my religious background. That makes me sound my religious zealot. I'm not at all, but that kind of part of me, where I grew up, etc. And it's like, I always think of I wasn't going to mention it, but I mentioned it, and you probably will know who I mean when I say this, Emily. There's someone very well known in the disability art space who always gave an example. She is the head of a lead disability arts organisation. Her first day at work, she was on public transport to go to work, and people were seeing her and actually come up to her and say, "Oh, you're going to see a movie?"
Oh my God.
She was actually a CEO of, and know who I mean when I say that, CEO, and she does, CEO of this arts organisation, and I love that example. Like, it's
I would love to be a fly on the wall for that little interaction. See how that went down. You make a really good point, Dan, and I think Danny has mentioned this as well. The idea of intersectionality, because we are so often seen as people with disability, as that's who we are. And it is, but it's just one part of who we are.
Totally.
And I go back to what Danny was saying about how sometimes their disability can, impact their trans or gender identity experience and vice versa. So I think intersectionality is an important thing for people to know about.
Yeah, if you add people of colour onto that as well, for example, people from cultural and linguistic diverse backgrounds, there's even more complex things on top of that, I imagine. So I'm grateful to be sitting here in this little Jimmy.
But it is. I mean, it's just changing societal, supposed norms. They shouldn't be normal, but changing the perceptions and everyone's views and Australia is getting better at that. I know there's other countries that are better than Australia in terms of being more open and accepting of not just cultural background, religious backgrounds, just all these different communities. And it's just about people being open, accepting, and kind at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
It comes back to those individuals and just their ability to just respect other humans, because we're all humans. Everyone has their different challenges, everyone's different ages, different abilities, different skill sets. So what makes one set so far superior to the other set? And I think that's what's good when we can at least advocate for our communities to drive change and just drive those perceptions, isn't it?
Yeah, and you kind of hit on the hammer too, I think, when you were talking about the cultural shifts that needs to happen, because the legislative shifts have happened. The United Nations, all these different things that we've got in place now, the legislation is there. Like, it's written in black and white. The issue is it's not necessarily being practiced in field at the time, face to face. And again, that's going to take time, and Australia will hopefully eventually catch up.
I might change tack a little bit, because I know that for me, in exactly 115 days at time of filming, I will be going to the Taylor Swift concert.
She's the one who got a ticket.
Yes.
We have to get you up there.
Ticket. But, so I think for me, and I'm sure for everyone here, access to entertainment and stuff like that is really important. How do you guys find, like, attending events, booking tickets, things like that?
Yeah, for me personally, I guess it's a new journey for me, just the past 5 years. When I was in hospital and then first out of hospital, I had a power wheelchair, similar to Emily's. And so going to the movies with the kids was difficult because, it's accessible in the sense that you can get to the front and there's the wheelchair seating and then you're sort of, watching the movie like that. So if I didn't have any physical disabilities before or after that,
you would. It's good.
With the positioning. So that was definitely one thing in the early days. And then as I got better with prosthetics, I didn't need the wheelchair as much, and therefore I would, walk up the stairs and could kind of choose where I sat. Generally, I'd want to be near an aisle just for better access. And events, bands, I would just be conscious of if I was on the floor, because in prosthetics, standing still for, say, seem to hit at about 40-minute mark where it really start to hurt. Whereas if I'm constantly walking and moving, it's okay, but it's when I'm standing still in the one spot for 40 minutes or so, it starts to hurt. So then you got to kind of tough it out. But that was my own choice, where I went with my friends on the floor, whereas I could get accessible seating or go in the seated areas, not a problem. So I generally just book tickets to entertainment events normally through an app. But I know for me, I've always got that option to call the line to get accessible seating. And that can vary with my prosthetics. Sometimes I do need to be in a wheelchair, or I do need to just take it a bit easier and not walk so far. But again, it comes back to your own personal choice, where you can have that power to make that decision. It's like, well, today I can't do that, so I need that support, I need that help, and I still want to go and see that band, or I still want to go to the movies, or I still want to watch that sporting team. So I think for me, it's just that ability to choose, in that moment, what will suit how I'm feeling and how physically able I am to handle it. But I've had mixed things with accessibility going to events over the past 5 years. But I mean, because I live close to, in a city, generally accessibility is a bit better and people are more understanding that, but I do know in other parts of Australia and the world it's just non-existent. So I do feel fortunate that we're in a bigger city and you do have that option, like whether it's wheelchair taxis or ramps or lifts most of the time to be able to go to the movies or the theatre or go to a sporting event. So it's still got a way to go, but for me, I've found it has been improving.
Yeah.
I would say, from my perspective, because again, what I said a moment ago, wearing the two hats, literally, as someone who is in the performing arts industry, I'm very mindful from a get-go, if the show's going to be, dare I say it, and it's related to what we're just saying here, accessible both for my audience as well as for those that I'm working with. And I think it's so interesting that even like I was talking to one of the people who organised today, you know, with you, and it was trying to find a space that was accessible.
Yeah.
Which I think's indicative of the whole idea of, I can't think of a word, and you may be able to tell me, with disability design, you know, the whole...
Universal design.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should know it, you know, paint a blank, sounds like two words, you know. But, you know, in terms of that, you know, like, our shows, I was saying to you, my mum, for general purposes, has a disability now acquired in the last few years as well. And it's very upsetting. There's been some shows she hasn't been able to go to mine because she hasn't felt it's accessible.
Yeah.
My mum, and I don't want to say you and my mum when I say this, but my mum is the same person that she was a couple of years ago, you know? But it's like, you know, like trying to explain that, and we are in a space, you know, and when we say this, that is talking about accessibility, but it's only when we have people like you doing this video that people will actually not just put a face to something that is out there, but actually say that. I always say to people, if nothing else, you are missing out on a great percentage of the population in terms of tickets, you know, in terms of money, you know, especially post-COVID, that we are still not in inverted commas, the normal state of where the industry was pre-COVID, I should say, you know, and it just makes sense to literally have things accessible. Like, I know 99.9% of the time I'm able to get around, but you were talking about taxis, and I'll just give this an example in my own personal experience. I do have taxi subsidy vouchers, you know, but I often have disagreements, be polite when I say this, and sometimes it has had to go further, but unfortunately nothing gets done when I'm told I'm not disabled enough to have them from the driver. And we've talked about this is both and it's the whole funny thing is that it's not just about awareness, it's literally, and I can't think of a better word, but we mentioned this a lot, kindness, you know. And I mean, I think we're saying kindness in a real sense, not like, I guess I said, like, after I see you, I'm actually having transport taking me to her appointment. That is a right of mine as I see it, you know. Yeah. But, you know, tomorrow I may want to get the train, you know, and I often do, but just,
it goes back to what we were saying, is that legislative shifts have happened, but social shifts and attitudinal shifts need to catch up, and we need to have the infrastructure to be able to support all of that as well.
And the language.
And the language, yes, absolutely, great point. So I would love to talk about media representations, because I know as an artist and advocate, media can have a huge role to play in representation of disability, but it also brings up a lot of challenges. What do you think some of these are in terms of media representations? Dan?
Okay. The first thing that comes to mind from my own lived experience in both the intersectionality which we're talking about. I think, and I only mentioned this last week as part of my development, and that's someone like Chloe Hayden, you know, from Hard by Kai. Great performer, great person, etc., great talent, etc. My concern, and I can speak on behalf of Lem, you know, but I'm worried they will be just put in that, something we're just talking during the break, box, thank you, you know, that box, you know, like, as I was saying, you know, yes, I have dealt with deals with disability, not just neurodiversity, and yes, it's important, but I don't want to just be seen as, which sometimes I have been seen as, or been said to my face, as the neurodiverse director. I'm also the queer director, I'm the half Jewish director, I'm all these things.
The hats.
You know, the hats, exactly, the boxes, you know, and I think like representation is important, but I think it's get back to what we've been talking all morning, about, you know, it's up to the individual. And as I said, like, I deliberately cast 6 people who are neurodiverse, but some of those stories we were told there for someone in both worlds would, I won't disclose because obviously personal and watch this space, you know, next stage, you know, but it was literally quite scary that, and I mean scary in a true sense, that a lot of the experiences that my performers experienced were literally by being put into, you know, representation, and I'm not talking about my project, of course, you know, but, you know, the projects they've been put on, they have not felt safe. And how do we find that balance, like you were just mentioning about different terms of diversity, like First Nations, etc., you know, like you can't have some person, you know, like from First Nations, and they may have had the privilege or defined privilege that someone maybe, I am generalising now, you know, not from inner city and being in regional areas. And I also have come from a regional perspective, so let you talk, shut up, Dan, drink your water.
I don't know. Look, I think are we talking about visibility, media representation, that kind of thing? I think it's very hard to, like, how do we even know what does disability look like? You know what I mean? And how I think that we, as people with disability, may potentially be putting too much, that might sound ridiculous, but might be putting too much pressure on other people to be a representative. There's no such thing as representative politics like that anymore. There's never going to be one campaign, one person, one visible thing for disability or for people who are on the rainbow spectrum. So I think that if we let go of that and we just talk more about embracing our diversity in the way that we do present and in the way we are represented in the media, that's important, including also having our own voices heard more so much than having someone else say who we are, or as long as we can be self-determined, I feel, as long as we can speak our stories within the media, that's where, like for me, that's where the true value of media representation is. It's not in necessarily dumbing it down for Today, Tonight, or whatever average TV show to make it nice and palatable for the average person. But I also think it's important to a certain degree, tend to the average person, whoever that might be, or normal, as you might say, because there needs to be more education, obviously, and more media representation of people out there with disabilities.
So it's really that balance between being represented and taking that space, but also having custody over our own stories.
Yes, absolutely, ownership, absolutely.
I think people do see through that to a certain extent, and I know in sort of the mass media, you know, commercial ads with I think ANZ and Amy recently have got various people with disabilities, but again, they're the more physical, obvious disabilities. So you could say it's a start, at least it's something where they're trying to shed more light on this for everyone, but again, it's a small part, isn't it, of all of these communities. So it is nice to see on one hand, but it's only a start. The way I've been seeing it with mass media, and it has also been good in the big papers or on commercial television where there's more exposure to disability sports. So
Yeah.
whether that's wheelchair basketball or
Football,
rugby
yeah.
or the Paralympics or football,
Yeah.
it's there seems to be a lot more coverage and exposure that way. So there's a long way to go, but at least that's a start. They're seen on mass media, whether it's television or ads. So I think that's a way of helping to normalise isn't the right word,
No, but I know what you mean.
but to
Make
make it an
part of
inclusive,
the
inclusive
landscape.
society. Yeah, and the landscape is we're part of it, right?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
voters.
Yeah.
We pay taxes, like
Yeah.
you know, regardless of people's
Civilian.
backgrounds or disabilities, it's still part of those communities. So there's no reason why they can't be part of the other parts of society or mass media as well. So it seems to be, from my personal perspective, it seems to be heading in the right direction, where there is more exposure for people in general.
Absolutely, and I think it is important to celebrate those baby steps of success as well, because a lot of these discussions can be issue focused and problem focused rather than solution focused and celebrating success. So I think that's a good point to keep in mind as well.
And also, this is why I feel projects like this are so important, because even as you were speaking then, I was thinking that we're all within this capitalistic colonized framework.
Yeah.
So the more that we do within that's a little bit left of center of that, I
Yeah.
feel the broader the representation is going to be. When we take money and capitalism out of the equation, we talk more a little bit about stories and more personal things, I think that we get more out of people with disabilities.
Yeah, and it shifts, doesn't it? It shifts mindsets and shifts ways of thinking. So it's not just, thrown down your throat and everyone's a robot and can't think for themselves, which I know that's what they want, because it's easier to control.
No,
Keep
yeah.
everyone in line and within the straight line. So I
Yeah,
think
no straight lines. Just,
up and down and around. And
yeah.
But I think that's good, because it shifts mindsets, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
makes people be more aware and be open-minded and think about other possibilities, really.
And also what's happened, I've noticed as well in the last, probably specifically the last 5-10 years, is we're seeing more people with their own cameras, like more people doing their own YouTube channels, their own TikTok, their own, so self-made, peer-based, collaborative work is now getting more exposure within the digital format specifically, because people now have access. They can record a video about their experience or put something out there in a lot more accessible way than having to go somewhere else for an interview or fill out a form, that kind of thing.
Because who's to say, there's more than one way to be represented
That's
or to
exactly right.
represent yourself.
Yeah. I used to always say to myself, I'll never be happy until I see a picture of someone who's non-binary using a wheelchair on the side of a bus. But then I thought, and I actually saw that recently. I saw a trans person, a representation of a trans person. I thought, God, that just doesn't do it for me. And then I thought, well, that's my expectations. So, and other people, of course, you would have an expectation about what does disability actually even look like? How do you know what I mean? So how do we make it into something the media can support, uphold, and share amongst other people? The way we do that is by having these conversations today and by telling our own stories, because we can't expect the normal media, the average media, to do it for us.
So it's about reclaiming media then and redefining media for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I know my job at Brand X, yes, I'm the access coordinator, but I also have set up, number one, we're creating a disability action plan, which I'm very proud of, because there are a lot of bigger organisations in the art space who aren't doing that to begin with. But that plan has actually been led by a committee that I've set in place of 6 professional artists with a disability of different backgrounds, arts practices, etc. And I was very mindful that had to be that, yes, you've got Dan, but you've only got Dan, you're only going to get one perspective,
Yeah.
And there have been some heated discussions, and I think that is where real change happens. That literally, you know, that old adage of it coming to the table, you know.
Yes.
Not always we are at the table. If we are at the table, you know, one of our legs might be cut off, so to speak, and that's only really bad. I realise I just said.
No.
So,
It's true.
no, but you know, but it's like, you know, like, it's really interesting. Like, as you said, when you do see like someone who represents, inverted commas, me, whatever that me is, it may not always be me. It can't always be me. It won't be me.
Yeah.
But how do we get to, like, I always give the example, and someone told me this early on. There was and I fortunately can't remember the company, the person's name, etc. But there was an opera company in South Africa. I hate saying able-bodied, but just an opera company, okay? It was actually run by...
Non-disabled.
Thank you. Love this woman, you know. But it was literally not being led, it was led by someone who was visually impaired. To me, that is what will success be, when it's actually not like the disabled person wants a disabled company, and as I said, I'm open to disagreement at this table, but to me, that is true inclusivity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I think what true inclusivity means to me is that we have access to disabled spaces, but we also have access to mainstream spaces if we want them.
Yeah.
Because we may be able to operate in one space at one time or in another space at another time. Either way, to be cut off from either one of those spaces is cutting off parts of our identity.
Absolutely. I mean, this is how identity is created, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Through the context of the social environment. And if we're not given access to the average social environment, then how are we exposing people to... I don't know what I'm saying.
No,
Hidden away.
Yeah.
Hidden away, right?
Yeah,
And you're not.
other side, other mind.
But part of that is also
Yeah.
because, like that, when you said before, you know, you've got a disability, that kind of that dismissive attitude, instead of it being, oh, okay, well, let's embrace what benefits come with you having a disability, being someone with a disability, and what other values and what other resources am I bringing because of that? Like, I can't be the person I am. I wouldn't be the person I am without my disability. You know what I mean? But there's other, like you say, if I can't, the amount of times I bought tickets to places and just ended up cannot go, can't deal with it. So that's, you know, sorry, I'm just ranting.
That's
True.
good.
You shouldn't be sort of restricted or blocked from.
Yeah.
I am,
accessing
so I just don't go.
Yeah.
You should.
I just don't go.
I won't say you accept it, but it is just a byproduct. Like,
Yeah.
or I can think about him like, and we know like most people here, or probably all of us here, have been to the big concerts, the Taylor Swift, etc. And it's really interesting. Like, I have been with a show with a friend of mine who has got a disability, and literally we've gone to the venue and said, just what you're saying, it's just too hard.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes if I've known people organise an event, events have been put into place, but it's like, you know, it's not just a companion ticket.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's actually, we always tend to really segue into what I'm going to say next. Because in terms of, you know, when we do want to operate in those mainstream sorts of environments, I think Garth and I were discussing, you know, the importance of assistive technology and how that can, you know, support that. Did you want to talk about a little bit about assistive technology and how important that is?
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, speaking just from a physical disability, it's huge. Everything from, obviously for me, prosthetics, which enables me to walk just around, and most people don't notice. Like I've been driving for 2 years, and I drive with my prosthetics on, just an automatic vehicle. But even I've parked in disabled spots. So I have a disabled sticker, and people have, because I walk, it looks like I walk normally with my prosthetics. People sort of go, "Oh, look at this young man just rocking up in the disabled spot," and just, you know. And then they eventually realise, and then they're kind of horrified. But I don't get offended. I take it as a compliment because they just think, oh, well, what's this guy doing in disabled spot? But things with the assistive technology, from just getting around, just being able to go grocery shopping, drop the kids to school, go out and about, so prosthetics, but also when I was in power wheelchair, when I do need to use the power wheelchair, because if I get sores on my legs and therefore I have to be off the legs for a week, then I'm in the wheelchair. So it's massive because it still allows me to get out and about, and I'll organise the wheelchair taxi and can still go to the movies, and albeit you're at the front and it's not the best view of the actual screen, but
I know
you do have that option. And then also just using your smartphone or a computer, the assistive technology built into that with accessibility is great, because it does allow you to actually, everything's on the internet digital based, so you can actually buy tickets to things or shop online or do research. And so for me personally, with being an amputee, that assistive technology is huge. And even in from arm, I've recently just got a myoelectric arm, which is kind of like a robot arm that operates off has sensors that operate off your off the muscle and electrical signals that go into your arm when you open and close. So then once you learn to control that, you can operate that myoelectric hand like a normal hand. Open, close, do gestures, pick things up, which is huge, because it's essentially like my replacement left hand. So for me personally, assistive technology enables me to do most things that I need for independence and just to get around in day-to-day life easier. I think it just makes your life easier and gives me that independence. So
something we talked about when we first met was that you are a parent with disability. You have 3 kids. And I wanted to talk about how you have found adapting to life as a parent, having to adapt to having a disability.
Definitely, it's it kind of because I had our daughters before I got sick, so I think they were 5 and 3 when I fell ill. So it was quite. I mean, a middle daughter at the time didn't realise because she was 3, and it kind of went over her head a little bit. But the 5-year-old knew. But there was actually some good books developed that helped with their journey, and to sort of see me on all the machines and just understand in their own language what they would see and the journey that I would be on, sort of in my recovery, and then getting used to prosthetics and adapting that way. So for me, again, it's been part of my day-to-day life of just learning how to do everything from putting on a t-shirt to picking up a mug to feeding myself breakfast and making myself a cup of tea to driving. It's just all these little things that I've had to retrain myself to do, and then that's translated into being a parent, because you might have to make them breakfast or help them get dressed, or it's just little things, or do housework, cleaning, washing, driving them to school and pickups and their sports. Probably the biggest challenge in the last 2 years is since we had our son, and getting him dressed, changing his nappy, doing all that sort of stuff. So that's been, and I do that sort of 3-4 days a week now. So it's again, it's just amazing what humans can do to adapt and relearn, and that's what I've had to do over these past few years. Just learn and adapt and just train myself to do different types of tasks. So. But I'd say in terms of the parenting side, that would be the hardest with the baby. Yeah. So managing the baby, putting them to bed and feeding them, and but once you learn, it's amazing what you can do, and you've just got to be positive and keep at it, and all of a sudden it's just not a thing. You just do it, you know. I'm constantly putting him in and out of the car and taking him shopping, and it just becomes your new normal. It's your life, and it's just the way it is. So, I know in the early days my daughters were they wanted to show off my prosthetic legs to all their kids, and I was like the robot man or something. So that was kind of, they were so proud of it, which was it was great. You know, they weren't, you know, I thought they might be embarrassed or a bit worried, but all the kids at that age, you know, they think it's amazing. It's like, oh, you know, you're like a robot man. Like, yeah. So which was pretty cool.
What I love, because I live at home with my 2-year-old niece, and I've lived at home with her since she was born, and so disability is just such a normal, natural part of her life. She doesn't know anything different, which I think is, you know, lovely, because she just thinks it's great that she can, you know, go up and down on my high-low bed and things like that. She just thinks Auntie Anne's got, you know, some special superpowers, really. Which is cute. I did want to ask you one more question on that, because I think it's a really interesting perspective. When you are out and about with your kids, do people relate to you differently as a parent than they would have if you were not, or when you were non-disabled?
I guess initially because it was more obvious, and then as I adapted and got better at using prosthetics and just how I handled myself, people didn't notice as much. So people that meet me now at sporting events, they're surprised that also I'm bilateral below knee as well. Like, you know, I think the left hand's, if I haven't got an arm on, left hand's pretty obvious, but so they're generally pretty good, but I know I don't get treated any differently.
Initially, maybe, yes.
I did, because it stood out more. And they were nice. Like, they would, oh, do you need more help? And like, if I was helping out with coaching or something like that, they would offer to help. But apart from that, no. They've generally, because a lot of them did know me before as well, and but no, most of them have tried to lend a helping hand and try to assist in any way, and that kindness we talked about, and just being good human beings. I mean, that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? Just that support. And they're always offering, oh, we can pick your daughter up from this and drop her home, and just little things like that, which I think you just do normally. Has been good, but it's, for me personally, there hasn't been too many things. It's actually been more whether they're reluctant to approach me because I've got the kids with me, but there has been times when I've been approached by people, and you know, there's kind of the sympathy side of it, and they're like, oh, you know, you're doing so well, oh, good on you, which, you know,
I was going to ask about that, because there'd be that hero thing that happens with, like, oh, you've got so much patience, or you must be so strong because you're handling these kids and a disability. You know, like, there's that attitude as well. Have you come across that? Yeah, definitely. So that'd probably be the biggest thing, that people that don't know us, like at the family, they approach you, and you know, it's kind of in the shopping centre, and it's sometimes, you know, it's like you're busy and you're trying to shop or do something, but these people have, whether they feel sorry for you or they want a bit of, you know, it's a bit of a sympathy vote or something, which is, look, it's nice. I don't get offended by it. Sometimes it's annoying because they kind of see you as, you know, different, and they feel they have to have a chat to you about that.
That
Yeah.
would, yeah. So that would be more the thing.
Go on Wikipedia.
I often say
Yeah.
Google it.
Yeah.
Just Google it. Stop asking me personal questions.
You're-
Or pay me.
Yeah.
and then I'll give you a nice chat.
Exactly.
Tell you all you want to
the
know.
TED Talk.
Yeah. Welcome to my TED Talk. We're about to come to the last question, which is sad because I'd like this to last forever. But if it's a bit of a tricky question, but if there was one change you'd want to see for people with disability, what would it be?
It's a huge question.
Wow.
Or, okay, what are some of the changes
Some.
you'd like to see?
It's a long list.
Exactly.
I'd like to see more of us sharing our stories.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more peer-led things
Yeah,
happen. I'd
yeah.
like to see more community capacity building. I would like to hear of people sharing more stories about advocacy and empowerment that has been accessible to other people and therefore has helped them. There's too many things, I can't answer that in one.
Okay, that's fine.
I would say
No.
on
So
that,
many
worries.
things so much work needs to be done.
I would say on that note, yes, see, and we all, I think, without grouping us all in one group, but I will say this, acknowledge and perhaps celebrate at times our disability. But see, we are more than just the disability. You know, you're a dad with 3 kids, you know, and all the challenges, the struggles. I'm an artist who's trying to have a career, you know, in a very competitive industry, you know. So I would say basically see the person first and foremost is the thing that I'm, in my own advocacy, I'm trying to promote, and that basically, yes, I will tell you about my disability and my lived experience, but on my terms, you know, and I think that's the whole funny thing. But in terms of ownership, like, I will say, like, because inverted commas, I present normal or normally, you know, like I can see it because a lot of my friends are in the disability community, you know, and it's very interesting to see that it's almost like a before and after, and you can speak far more than I can on that. Right? But you know, basically see that we are all people just trying to live our lives the best way we can. Sometimes we make mistakes, sometimes we don't, and it's just being human. And I would say, go on that note, Em, the most important thing, and we mentioned it a lot this morning, is that society sees us as humans that have the same desires, needs, wants that, inverted commas, non-disabled people have, you know, and there are some things that I do better than a non-disabled person too. Won't go in there, but you know, but there are some things that I don't do, and realise that let's just all try to, I think having more discussions like this would be what I would desire or hope for as we move forward. So keep going in.
Yeah, I think to echo Dan and Danny, definitely that peer-led, because I think that's lived experience, personal experience that represent different groups within disabled communities, and it's just that education, like passing down that knowledge and creating the awareness. But I think that the 2 biggest things is the awareness and education, because even within, you know, just because I'm an amputee doesn't mean I'm an expert on other amputees or other forms of disability. And I think education and awareness is the big thing, and that's why something like this is great, and International Day for Disability, because it starts that awareness and gives you a bit of a platform and a voice, and that's where social media can be so powerful to get that, and it gradually will, you know, you'll shift mindsets and create awareness, and it's a start. I know people have been doing it for decades, and a lot of it's fallen on deaf ears, but I think now with these powerful tools of social media and the ability to get out there a lot easier and get a lot more support for all these communities. And like Dan was saying, is, you know, you just want to be human. Like, you know,
it's just
common humanity,
nothing more,
nothing
nothing
less.
less.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just treated like everyone else, just independence and just being included into society, whatever part of society you want to be a part of. And I think that's, what I'd like to see.
Yeah. Is there any other closing comments people want to make?
No, not really, but I did just think about something then when you were talking about, now it's gone, shit.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
No, about just, like, for me, it's really important that we create these platforms for dialogue and the visibility in the social media, because I think we have, when I was growing up, I grew up in a very rural town, very isolated, and this is before the internet. And I think, like, what you're saying is so important when we have platforms that create dialogue and visibility for people up and coming. And I just want ableism abolished completely. We can just...
Preach.
Yeah,
Yes.
get rid of that, get rid of gender, get rid of ableism, and it's not that simple though, is it? And
No.
you know, it's such a big question to ask because there's so much work to be done. But what I would like to see is, like, for example, when you said because you're an amputee doesn't mean you can speak for all amputees. And it's the same with anyone with a disability. We can't speak for anyone else. And this is part of the problem that we kind of come up with representative politics around identity. And I would like to see us come from more of a need-based perspective.
Yeah.
Like, what do we need? What do we value? As distinct from who are we? Like, take it away from personalising a little bit and look at what are our needs and what are our potentials and how do we get them met, really, essentially. That's what I'd like to see.
I always find it funny, Emily, and I try to always include it in any theatre play application or directing opportunity I've been put forward for or I'm applying for. I always, and I paraphrase this in terms of gender pronouns, apologies, I don't only talk about mine, but I always remember at the end of there's a play come film, Good Elephant Man, and the guy makes a comment, the actor, the character makes a comment, I'm just a man, you know. I just say that I'm just Dan, you know. And when we get past that, and why, as we keep going back to it, you know, this conversation, like, I too have had experiences in rural Australia and all those challenges that come that way, but also realise, you know, that, like, some of the issues in the big city that I experienced that I didn't experience in a smaller part of Australia, you know. And it's like, I think, like, and then I know we haven't got time to have this whole conversation, but when we talk about, like, NDIS, like, not, I think even something like that. So someone is an amputee. Okay, what does that particular person need, you know?
Yeah.
And I know of examples, and we all know of examples. And as I said, this is one that about NDIS Thai tribe. But, you know, like, there have been people who actually may need electric wheelchair on a more permanent basis, who have actually been knocked back lad because they don't fit. We keep saying the boxes, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, so
Boxes and the hats.
Yeah.
Garth, any other things that you like to say? Or
No, I mean, probably following on from Dan with regards to support, government support and NDIS. And look, we're lucky we are in Australia in that sense, or we do have some level of funding for people who are on the NDIS, whether it's a support worker, a companion, or a personal carer that can assist with, you know, the bathroom or showering. But again, which I've found, a lot of assistive technology and things that I need for my day-to-day life have taken months, some years actually, years and years, to get approvals and tick our favourite boxes there, tick, 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 which, you know, they're just crucial to people's life.
Just as a survival.
Right?
Yeah.
And I, like, my wife who works in a hospital, and she's been able to, you know, help with advocating and her colleagues who have had NDIS experience. So if we were struggling for years, like people who have non-English speaking background or lower socioeconomic, maybe not as educated, can't advocate for themselves, therefore they don't get the support and help they need. And I think this is a big issue.
Yeah, I think it is, and we could talk about this for ages.
I know, this is
but unfortunately, I need to wrap up this great conversation that we've had today.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you so much to you all for coming. It's been a joy for me. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as I have.
Absolutely.
And I really hope the audience that sees this will get something out of it. Thanks so much.
Thank
you, Emily.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for facilitating.
Yep.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
good questions. Thank you.